Well, tonight with me, Razia Iqbal. Syria first. The city of Aleppo has for days now seen the worst bombardment of the conflict yet. Since the wrecked ceasefire on September the 19th, brokered by the Americans and the Russians, there's also been a war of words between Washington and Moscow. The latest comes in an interview the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has given to the BBC. Speaking to Stephen Sackur, Mr. Lavrov accuses the United States of further fueling the war in Syria. He said the Americans failed to comply with requests to separate opposition forces from terrorist groups, in particular the al-Qaeda affiliated al-Nusra Front, which now calls itself Jabhat Fateh al-Sham. He claimed that this was because Washington wanted to protect the jihadist group in order to force regime change in Syria.
It took them, I think, several months until in December they pledged solemnly to take as a priority an obligation to separate the opposition from Nusra. They still, in spite of many repeated promises and commitments, they still are not able or not willing to do this. And we have more and more reasons to believe that from the very beginning the plan was to spare Nusra and to keep it, just in case, for Plan B or for Stage 2, when it would be time to change the regime.
Since the breakdown of the ceasefire marked by the Russian or Syrian attack on a convoy about to deliver aid to besieged parts of Aleppo, Washington has accused Moscow of being responsible for widespread civilian deaths and injuries. In the BBC interview, Mr. Lavrov repeated Moscow's denials that its airstrikes caused civilian casualties.
We take all necessary precautions not to hit civilians. If this happens, well, we are very sorry, but we need to investigate each and every accusation. So far, we have not been given any meaningful proof of what is being said about the convoy, which was bombed or attacked on the 19th of September, and which we have good reasons to believe was a provocation.
The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Well, in just a moment, we'll hear from a US senator responding to Mr. Lavrov's claims. But first, Jennifer Cafarella from the Institute for the Study of War based in Washington. I asked her to explain more about the group Nusra, which Mr. Lavrov referred to.
Well, al-Nusra Front was al-Qaeda's official affiliate in Syria until recently, when the al-Qaeda leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri, gave permission to Nusra, actually, to rebrand itself in order to appear more moderate, to preclude an American intervention against the group, and to support the group's efforts to negotiate a merger with other Syrian armed opposition groups. So Jabhat Fateh al-Sham is still essentially the same group as al-Nusra Front. It is still part of the al-Qaeda project in Syria, but it is working hard to moderate its image in order to make possible deepening relationships with Syrian armed opposition groups.
Let's just talk a little bit about how they're fashioning the way in which they operate inside Syria. How powerful is this group in the way in which it operates inside the country?
Sure. Well, al-Nusra Front, or JFS, after its rebranding, is one of the most powerful groups on the battlefield fighting against the Assad regime. It's powerful for a number of reasons, one of which is because it uses tactics such as the use of suicide bombers to penetrate into otherwise difficult to penetrate regime defenses. The group is also highly effective on the battlefield at coordinating its own fighters and coordinating with the fighters of other opposition groups.
And there's no way in which we should perceive them as being moderate, then?
No, they certainly are not moderate. They are the tip of the spear for al-Qaeda's project in Syria. But the difficulty that the U.S. and the West more generally faces is that the Syrian opposition does not agree with al-Qaeda's ideology. They don't share the same desired end state in Syria. But the priority for many opposition groups is surviving the fight against the Assad regime. And in order to do so, they have become dependent on al-Qaeda, which is really one of the only battlefield allies that they have at this time. It doesn't equal ideological agreement or anything of the such, but it complicates Western ability to sideline al-Qaeda or to take action against al-Qaeda, because doing so is equal to facilitating the Syrian regime to advance. And that's a very difficult position to be in.
So when we hear Washington speak about trying to get rid of Islamic State, they don't often mention trying to get rid of Jabhat Fateh al-Sham. Why is that?
Well, it has been a glaring absence in American policy to date. The U.S. intervened after the rise of ISIS in order to eliminate that threat to the U.S. and to the West, but has only undertaken a limited intervention against al-Qaeda in Syria. It is important to note that the U.S. is conducting airstrikes against key high-level al-Qaeda operatives and has been doing so since the start of the air campaign against ISIS. But the U.S. has not expanded that air campaign to target al-Nusra Front or its successor, Jabhat Fateh al-Sham, more aggressively, because doing so would actually support the Assad regime.
Jennifer Cafarella from the Institute for the Study of War. Well, a short time